I was reborn as the villain in my own family's story. The words echoed in my head like a bell tolling at a funeral, fitting since I was standing in the rain, watching my own casket being lowered into the earth. I should have been crying, screaming, bargaining with whatever cruel god had decided this was justice. But I just stood there. From my place on the mossy hill behind the oak trees, I could see the polished black carriages lined up along the gravel path. Guests murmured under umbrellas, holding silk handkerchiefs they barely used. I recognized every face. The family that had turned against me. The siblings who had whispered behind my back. The mother whose cold eyes never softened, not even in death. And there she was, dressed in mourning lace and pearls, my mother, standing by the gravesite like a statue carved from judgment and indifference. "It's for the best," she said, her voice slicing through the rain. "At least it's over now." That was when I realized something was very wrong, because I wasn't Grace anymore. I didn't know how I knew it, not yet, but every part of me screamed that something had changed. My skin felt wrong. My fingers trembled with a strength I didn't recognize. There was a tightness in my chest, a burning behind my ribs like my heart had been torn out and sewn back in backward. And then, the whispers. She always was difficult. She brought it on herself. I heard she tried to ruin the family name. My own funeral felt like gossip hour, and I couldn't take it. I turned and ran. Through the dripping forest, down the mud-covered path, back to the one place I'd sworn I'd never return to, Blackthorn Estate. The iron gate groaned as I pushed it open. The house loomed, all spires and shadows, its windows like cold, watching eyes. Something about it made my bones ache. The air was heavier here, older, as if the very bricks remembered the lies told within them. I burst through the front doors. Everything was exactly the same. The grand staircase, the dusty chandelier, the faint scent of old roses and mildew. My heart pounded louder than the thunder outside. Then I saw it, the mirror at the end of the hallway. I should have looked away. I didn't. A pale girl stared back, maybe 17. Sharp collarbones, hollow cheeks. Her raven black hair fell in limp waves. Her lips were cracked, and her eyes, my eyes, were too wide, too afraid. But they weren't mine, not anymore. "Who?" I whispered, reaching out. The reflection moved with me, but the body wasn't mine. I leaned closer. That's when the name struck me like a knife to the gut. Anne, the youngest daughter. The disgrace. The tantrum-throwing, scandal-starting, emotionally unstable little sister no one spoke of unless there was blame to cast. The villain. And I was in her skin. I stumbled back from the mirror, clutching the stair rail. My breath came fast, too fast, and the air wouldn't go into my lungs. Was I hallucinating? Dead? Dreaming? A door creaked to my left. One of the maids, gray-haired, jittery, froze in place when she saw me. Her eyes widened. "Miss Anne." She bowed immediately, but the tremble in her voice betrayed her fear. She didn't look at me, not really, as if I might explode if she stared too long. Or worse, she expected me to slap her. "What day is it?" I asked. She blinked. Monday, miss." My voice sounded strange, thinner, higher, but steady, controlled. And that scared her even more. "I want tea," I said, grasping for something to make her leave. "In my room." She nodded and scurried off like a mouse who had brushed against a sleeping cat's paw. I turned back toward the staircase, my fingers grazing the wood banister. Anne, memories not my own flitted through my mind like broken glass. Brief flashes of arguments, of someone locking her in her room, of pills and whispered threats, of laughter that wasn't kind, of being ignored, blamed, mocked. I hadn't just been reborn. I'd been recast. And this time, I wasn't the golden girl trying to please everyone. This time, I was the monster they warned their children about. The room, her room, was cold and sparse. No paintings, no flowers, no warmth. Just a bed, a desk, and a shattered porcelain music box sitting in the corner like a broken memory. I recognized it. It had been mine, once, as Grace. I had given it to Anne for her birthday. She had loved it. Until someone, probably Violet, smashed it. I sat on the bed, my fingers digging into the threadbare quilt. My heart was still racing. My body still felt like a borrowed dress, ill-fitting and foreign. But I wasn't afraid. Not really. I was angry. And underneath the anger, determination. In my last life, I had been useful. A perfect daughter. A business tool. A pawn who smiled and obeyed. And when I was no longer convenient, they buried me. This time I would be the villain, but on my terms. If they expected me to be cruel, heartless, manipulative, well, they shouldn't be surprised when I got good at it. The dining hall was a painting that refused to age. Candles flickered in iron sconces. Silverware gleamed like sharpened teeth. And seated at the long mahogany table, my family, as beautifully cold as ever, they were all here. My mother, perfectly poised in a navy gown that matched her frosty demeanor. Violet, my older sister, wearing smugness like perfume. Edward, the eldest, all stern jaw and righteous silence, glancing at me like I might sprout horns and start screaming at the roast duck. I slid into my seat at the far end of the table. No one spoke. Even the butler hesitated before pouring wine into my glass. The air was so tight with tension I could practically chew it. Finally, Mother broke the silence. "Are you going to throw another tantrum?" she asked, casually cutting her lamb. Her voice dripped with condescension. Violet smirked. I met my mother's eyes across the table. "Not today." I let the words settle, then picked up my fork and knife with delicate grace. She blinked. Just once. But I saw it. That flicker of confusion behind her mask. Violet's smirk faltered. Edward looked down at his plate. I took exactly 2 bites, sipped once from my wineglass, then set it down and stood. "I'm not hungry after all," I said softly. "Don't let me ruin the mood." And with that, I walked out, calm, straight-backed, without a single glance back. It was the most powerful dinner I'd ever attended. My room, Anne's room, was just as I'd left it earlier. Cold. Sparse. A place for forgetting, not for living. I paced the floor, the heels of my slippers whispering across the faded rug. My pulse was still steady, but inside I was reeling. How many times had Anne sat at that table, only to be cut down by words sharpened like daggers? How many tantrums were just cries for someone to listen? I didn't know where Anne ended, and I began anymore. But I knew this. She hadn't deserved their cruelty. Neither of us had. I pulled open drawers, searching for, I didn't know what, a clue, a truth, a piece of her. That's when I found it, tucked inside an old copy of Lady Windermere's Folly, a leather-bound journal, its spine cracked and softened by years of wear. It smelled like lavender and ink. I sat on the bed and opened it. At first, the handwriting was neat, crisp. Anne had tried to be orderly. If I am good, maybe they will notice. Maybe if I don't cry this week, they'll let me go to the opera. Then, a page later, Messier. Violet told Gregory I was broken. He laughed. Edward didn't deny it. Why does Mother pretend I'm invisible? And later still, jagged lines like the pen had been gripped too tight. If I screamed, would they finally hear me? Page after page. Scribbles, poems, letters never sent, doodles of birds in cages and hearts with cracks down the middle. Anne hadn't been a monster. She'd been a girl drowning in silence, and no one had thrown her a rope. I closed the journal and sat in the quiet. The candle flickered on the nightstand, casting shadows that danced like ghosts across the walls. They turned you into a villain, I whispered, because they needed someone to hate. My hand brushed over the cracked leather cover. That wouldn't be me. Not again. If they wanted a villain, fine. I'd play the part. But this time, I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't be their scapegoat or their silent shame. No, I would smile. I would sip their wine and wear their silks and smile until they bled from trying to guess what I was thinking. And when they tried to break me again, I'd already be the one holding the pieces of their world in my palm. I stood, walked to the vanity, and uncapped a faded tube of lipstick, a dark plum color. Probably Violet's cast-off. Anne wouldn't have dared wear it. I applied it slowly, deliberately, watching the woman in the mirror. "I'll be the villain," I said to her, "but I'll be the one in control." She smiled back. And this time, the smile wasn't hollow. The chandelier above the ballroom glittered like frost suspended in midair. Every corner of the Blackthorn Grand Hall had been polished to gleam. Marble floors, gilded moldings, crystal decanters. Nothing about this evening was accidental. Every rose in the vases had been selected to represent the family's supposed grace and power. And yet, when I entered, it was like all the air had been sucked from the room. I had chosen the dress myself, a sleek midnight blue gown that clung like silk to oil. Elegant, understated, but undeniably striking. My hair was swept up, a few loose curls framing my face, and a black velvet choker circled my neck like a warning. People turned, some whispered, some stared. And Violet, oh Violet, she looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Her gown was pink, ruffled, soft, and suddenly it looked childish. I descended the staircase slowly, each step deliberate. I didn't smile. I didn't fidget. I didn't break. "Is that Anne Blackthorn?" Someone murmured from a corner. "She looks different." Did she always have that posture? As if confidence was an accessory I'd stolen from someone more beloved. I passed a pair of baronesses and offered a brief, perfectly timed quip when one gasped, "My dear, you've blossomed." I raised my glass. "Well, villains need makeovers too." A ripple of laughter followed me. Let them laugh. Let them chatter. Let them be confused. Confusion was better than pity, and infinitely safer than clarity, because no one knew what to do with a villain who didn't behave. He found me near the fountain in the garden, where the soft trickle of water covered the whispers from the ballroom windows. The moonlight hit the marble just right, casting silver across the grass and shadows through the trees. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. "I was told you bite," he said, voice low, calm, like a man who enjoyed holding knives behind his back. I turned. The man before me was tall, dressed in black with silver accents. His eyes were dark. Not cruel, but sharp, like he missed nothing. I arched a brow. "Only when people touch without asking." His lips curled. "Not a smile, not exactly. Then I'll be sure to stay on this side of the hedge," he said. "You'd be the first." He stepped closer, and I didn't retreat. He held his ground like someone used to commanding attention, but not demanding it. That made him more dangerous than any lord I'd known. "Lord Rain," he finally said, offering a shallow bow. "Of Hymir." Ah, so that was him. Whispers had followed him all evening. A rising noble from the northern reach, son of a disgraced duke, rebuilding his house through wit and ambition, and rumored ties to dangerous circles. "What brings you to Blackthorn?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Curiosity. And a taste for theatrics. Then you've come to the right party." His eyes searched mine. "No," he said slowly. "I've come to the right person." I felt the heat rise behind my collar but didn't show it. "Careful, my lord." That almost sounded like admiration. He shrugged. "I like villains. They're honest about the rules they break." Before I could respond, a new voice interrupted from behind. "I see you found our little enigma." I turned to face her. The Duchess of Lan. She was older, wrapped in emerald silk, her white hair swept into an immaculate bun. Her presence was like that of a chess queen, silent, regal, with more power than anyone gave her credit for until it was too late. "Duchess," I said, inclining my head. Her eyes flicked from me to Lord Rain, then back again. "I've been watching you all evening." "Well, I do aim to entertain." She smiled thinly. "Don't flatter yourself, child. I wasn't entertained. I was assessing." I met her gaze evenly. "And what did you conclude?" "That you're clever." dangerous, and very much alone. A beat passed. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. They won't protect you, Anne. Not your mother, not your siblings, and certainly not this house. I didn't flinch. She continued, but I can teach you how to win. My breath caught. And just like that, the ballroom, the gowns, the chandeliers, all of it faded. Because I knew this moment. The choice. The gamble. Dancing with the devil, but on your own feet. Why me? I asked quietly. Because they've already cast you out. And because you're still standing. I looked her dead in the eyes. Teach me, then. I returned to the house well past midnight, the music echoing faintly behind me as I moved through the shadowed halls. The weight of my gown, the echo of my heels, the lingering scent of roses, all of it felt like theater. And I was finally holding the script, until I reached the study and found Edward waiting for me in the dark. He didn't rise when I entered. He sat behind our father's desk, one hand resting on a decanter, the other folded on the leather blotter. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. Quite the performance, he said. I shut the door behind me. You disapprove? I don't care what you do, he said coldly. As long as you do it far away from here. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because I already knew what he'd come to say. We've found you a husband, he said, finally looking at me. You leave next month. The room fell into a silence so complete it roared in my ears. Just like that? I said. You should be grateful. My laugh was soft. Too soft. Tell me, Edward. Was it Mother's idea? Or did Violet finally convince you I was too much of a stain on her social calendar? He stood. I don't care what you think, he snapped. This family has tolerated your chaos long enough. This is your only chance to remain useful. Useful, I repeated. You mean disposable. His jaw clenched. I walked toward him, slow and calm, until the desk separated us by mere inches. You can send me away, I said. You can marry me off, banish me, disown me. But I will still be a blackthorn, and I will not go quietly, he sneered. You always were a dramatic little brat. And you, I said, leaning forward, always underestimated the ones who learned how to smile while bleeding. I turned and walked out before he could reply. Because I'd already won that conversation. The house creaked like it remembered. Every floorboard, every sigh behind the walls, every flicker of candlelight, it all felt aware. And I didn't know whether it was my imagination, or if something truly ancient stirred in the bones of Blackthorn Estate. I had started spending my nights in the library. It was safer than my room, or at least it felt like it. The dust-laced silence there was oddly comforting. The books didn't whisper judgments like my family did. I was searching for something, anything. Anne had clearly left clues. Half-burned notes, journals with torn-out pages, pressed herbs between old ledgers. One evening I found a leather pouch tucked behind the doctrine of old spirits. Inside were fragments of chalk, a tiny silver pendant shaped like an eye, and a page so worn it nearly fell apart in my hands. The curse is generational. In the blood, in the stones. The first daughter always pays the price. Scrawled in Anne's jagged handwriting beneath that, I'm not the first. I just screamed the loudest. A chill crawled down my spine. The first daughter. That had been me. Grace. And before me, my aunt. She'd vanished in her 20s. A nervous breakdown, they'd said. The connections tightened around my ribs like cold fingers. Anne hadn't been hysterical. She had been aware. She had tried to understand what this house was doing to her. And now I was the one awake in the dark. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not even pretend. The wind outside scraped against the shutters like fingernails. I stared at the ceiling of my room, blankets up to my chin, candles guttering low. Then I heard it. Steps. Slow. Heavy. Just beyond my door. I held my breath. The steps paused, then moved again, not away but back and forth, as if pacing. My heart pounded. I rose from bed in silence, slid barefoot across the rug, and opened the door just a crack. No one was there. But the air was different. Thicker. The hallway stretched longer than it had during the day. The portraits on the walls looked off. Eyes where eyes hadn't been. Smiles too wide. As if the house was amused. I stepped out. The candle in my hand flickered violently, once, twice, then steadied. That's when I saw it. A slip of parchment, folded and tucked under the baseboard near my door. I bent down. Picked it up. In rushed, ink-stained handwriting. Don't trust anyone. Not even yourself. The flame went out. I didn't remember falling. 1 second, I was in the hallway. The next, I was on the floor of what looked like a storage room I'd never seen before. Books, vials, scraps of fabric, a broken mirror. Anne's sanctuary. No, not sanctuary. Refuge. And here, scattered like breadcrumbs, were more fragments of her unraveling, drawings of the estate with certain rooms circled in red, a map of the family tree with several names violently crossed out, and at the center, the word core scratched over and over again. I traced a finger across the word. The core of the curse? The house? My head throbbed. My skin prickled. And then, flash, I was Grace again, not in body, but in memory. I stood in Father's study. It smelled of pipe smoke and polished wood. The ledger in my hands shook as I turned to face him. These numbers, I'd said. They don't add up. He'd smiled. Calm, cold. Because you're not meant to see them. You're laundering through the orphanage fund. You were always clever, he said, sipping his brandy. And that's what makes you useful. I won't be a part of this, he sighed. Then I'll have to find someone who will. The next week, the accusation came. Embezzlement, fraud. My name on every page. My signature forged. My life ruined. My family didn't even blink when I was dragged out in front of reporters. Not one of them. I woke up with my cheek pressed against the cold stone floor of Anne's hidden room, my hands shaking. It had all come back. My death hadn't been an accident. Not really. I had been erased. Because I had become inconvenient. Just like Anne, the first daughter always pays the price. I crawled out of the hidden room as the sky began to pale outside. Dawn bleeding over the trees, my nightgown clung to my back with sweat. Dust coated my skin. The house had shown me its memory. Or maybe it had simply let me remember. Either way, one thing was certain now. I wasn't just playing a part anymore. This house was alive, and it wanted me gone. But I wasn't leaving, not until I found its heart, and ripped it out with my bare hands. He arrived without warning. I was in the solarium, reading through one of Anne's old notebooks, when the butler appeared, pale and twitchy as ever. "Miss Anne," he stammered. "There's a guest. He insists on seeing you." "Who?" I asked, already standing. He hesitated. "Mr. Elias Marrow." The name hit like a slap. Even without Anne's memories, I recognized it. Her fiancé, the one who vanished 3 weeks before their wedding. The one she never stopped writing about in tear-stained lines. The one who left without goodbye. I walked to the front parlor slowly, measured, controlled, but my palms were damp. Elias stood with his back to me, tall and rigid in a dark green coat. When he turned, I saw the anger in his eyes first, cold, sharp, practiced. But beneath it, surprise flickered for just a breath. "You've changed," he said. "People do." I replied evenly. He studied me. "Your voice. Your eyes. You're calmer." "I've had time to think." His mouth twitched. "That's dangerous." I didn't smile. "So is silence." He stepped closer, jaw tight. "Why did you lie about what happened to Clara?" I blinked. "Clara? My sister," he snapped. "She trusted you. and then she was dead. And you refused to explain what happened. My heart skipped. Anne never wrote about Clara's death in her journals. There were gaps, mentions of a terrible accident, but no clarity. I need you to tell me what you think happened, I said carefully. You pushed her, he said. You brought her to the cliffs that night. And the next morning she was gone. I didn't. I stopped. Anne didn't. He narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? I swallowed. You said I'd changed. Maybe that's true. Maybe I'm not the Anne you remember. He stared at me for a long time. Then quietly, almost as if speaking to himself, you speak differently. You look at me like I'm new. A beat. Then, with a breath, he looked away. If I thought you'd grieved her, maybe I could have forgiven you. But all I saw was silence. My voice softened. Maybe silence was the only thing she had left. He didn't answer. Just left, without another word. And for once, I didn't chase. Later that evening, I returned to the old family archives. It was buried beneath the west wing, damp, dusty, and full of forgotten truths. I knew what I was looking for. Anne's journals mentioned inconsistencies in the charity records. I followed the trail like breadcrumbs. Behind a false panel, I found them. Invoices, bank slips, donation records. At first, they looked clean. Then I saw the annotations. Corrections in 2 different handwritings. One was Anne's. The other was Violet's. And suddenly it all clicked. Violet had used the charity as her personal bank. When funds disappeared, she framed Anne. Easy, convenient, believable. Because who would question the broken, unstable little sister? And then I found it, a letter. Torn, but legible. You said you'd fix it, Violet. You promised. But they're blaming me, and you're still smiling at dinner like nothing happened. Anne's handwriting. Jagged, frantic. I stared at the letter until the words blurred. This wasn't a family. It was a machine that fed on scapegoats. And I was done being its fuel. Dinner that night was painfully elegant. Everyone dressed in their finest. The table glowed with candlelight and cruelty. Violet laughed too loudly. Edward drank too much. My mother sat at the head, carving lamb like it was a ritual. I waited until the main course. Then I stood, glass in hand. A toast, I said, voice bright. The table quieted. Edward rolled his eyes. Violet raised a brow. I'd like to raise a glass, I continued, to truth. Violet snorted. How novel. I ignored her. To the version of it we're told, to the version we're fed, and to the one we find buried under floorboards. I pulled the documents from my satchel and placed them gently on the table. Receipts, letters, Violet's notes. Every eye locked on them. What is this? Edward asked, frowning. Proof, I said, of fraud, theft. And the fact that I wasn't the one who ruined the Blackthorn Orphanage Fund. Violet paled. My mother didn't move. I turned to her. Did you know? Or did you just not care? Silence. Then, finally, my mother's voice. Cool and precise. Even if it's true, she said slowly, she's still my daughter. I froze. And you, she added, lifting her glass. You're just trouble. The words struck harder than a slap. For one insane moment, I waited for someone to defend me. Edward, a servant, anyone. No one did. Violet said nothing, just smiled, faint, victorious. I looked down at the papers, the truth, the proof, and I realized something I should have known all along. They never needed me to be guilty. They only needed me to be conveniently guilty. After dinner, I sat alone in the library, the fire dying low. My fingers brushed over Anne's last journal entry. If no one is coming to save me, then I'll save myself. I closed the book. Me too, Anne. Me too. The Duchess of Lan met me in the greenhouse. The morning light cut through glass panes dusted in frost. She wore emerald again, like power wrapped in silk. Her hands, as always, were folded neatly, but her eyes were far from gentle. "I expected you days ago," she said. "I needed to be sure," I replied. She raised a brow. "And are you—" I took a breath. "Yes." Silence stretched between us, filled only by the rustle of leaves and the drip of condensation. "I'll work with you," I said at last. "But I won't be your pawn." A slow smile curved her lips. "I don't want pawns, Miss Blackthorne. I want survivors." From behind the ivy-covered pillar, a familiar voice chimed in. "Then you found the right one." Lord Rain stepped into view, all black velvet and silver buttons, smug as ever. His gaze slid over me like he was trying to memorize every crack I refused to show. "You could have been a queen," he said, voice low. "If only you were born a man." I stepped closer, chin high. "I wasn't," I replied. "So I'll just have to break the rules instead." The Duchess chuckled. "I look forward to watching you do it." We found the heart of the house that same night. The map Anne had drawn wasn't just paranoia. It was a blueprint. Her drawings pointed to an unused wing, sealed decades ago after a fire. Behind a crumbling corridor and a half-collapsed staircase, we found it, a stone chamber, older than the rest of the manor, built from black granite veined in silver. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. A hum, a pulse, a quiet hunger. The walls were etched with symbols, runes I barely recognized, but my skin burned just from looking at them. In the center stood an altar, and on it, a mirror, small, framed in iron twisted into thorns. The glass rippled like water, even without wind. Lord Rain approached it, brows drawn. "This isn't just magic. It's memory." I stepped beside him. The mirror shimmered, then shifted. Suddenly, I was watching my past. Grace's past, the dinner where I was disowned, the ledgers I wasn't meant to see. The moment my father said, "You were never meant to matter," my fists clenched. Next, I saw Anne, screaming behind a locked door, holding her journal to her chest like a lifeline, whispering into the mirror, "Show me why. Show me why I don't deserve love." The mirror didn't show her comfort. It showed her every betrayal. "This thing feeds on pain," I said. "On stories," Lord Rain corrected. "On the stories we tell ourselves, or are forced to live." I turned to him. "Then what happens if we break it?" "You destroy the truth." "Not the truth," I said quietly. "Just the lie." Before anyone could stop me, I lifted the iron candlestick from the wall and smashed it against the mirror. It cracked, screamed, not with sound but with pressure, as if the whole house took a breath. Then it shattered. Light exploded across the walls. And then, silence, dead and complete. For the first time, Blackthorn House felt still. The fallout came quickly. The Duchess delivered the documents I'd gathered to the right people. Violet, stripped of her titles, was sent to a convent in the south, a place where silk turned to ash and gossip turned to prayers. Mother faced public disgrace. With her children at odds and her finances exposed, the court turned cold. She faded into the background of a world that no longer found her relevant. And me? I packed, not in shame, not in exile, but in victory. I didn't stay for the estate. It was never mine. It had devoured too many daughters to earn my loyalty. I chose something else, the Academy of Ars Lorium, where magic wasn't cursed and knowledge didn't bite, where I could learn how to reshape the world, not just react to it. Before I left, I wrote one letter, to Elias Marrow. I was her. I am not, but I remember the pain. Maybe one day, we talk again. I didn't seal it with a family crest. I signed it, Grace, because finally, that name belonged to me again. As the carriage pulled away from the gates of Blackthorn for the last time, I looked out at the trees, gold and crimson in the morning light. No one waved goodbye. No one begged me to stay. And that was fine, because for the first time, I didn't need their love. I had my own story now, And it started like this. They called me the villain. So I rewrote the story, and this time I win.